Now, by 2242, President Dick Richardson is president on the Enclave oil rig off the coast of California. But in 2215, in August of 2215, he starts his career in politics in the Enclave Congress. Much of his influence comes from his father. So here is a man who gets to a great status. I believe, I have it written down here, he serves for 5 consecutive terms. If you're not familiar with U.S. politics, a president, a sitting incumbent, usually gets 2 consecutive terms. You can do like president from 2020 to 2024, and then you could take off from 24 to 28, and then from 28 to 32, you could be president. It doesn't say that if you do it for 4 years, you can't run again. You could, but President Dick Richardson is a 5-term. That's 20 years. A 5-term president of these United States, or the Enclave. But much of his influence comes from his father, President Richardson. So not only are you dealing with a man who has such evil ideas that I'm about to talk about later, but he's also just like a shell of a man. In my notes, I have, he himself is a very nervous fella, very shifty. Not shifty in the sense of he's stealing, but shifty in the sense of they portray him as he never knows how to sit still and he never knows what's going on. He gets lost in thought and just kind of off in the distance. So he's more of a face than anything. And after doing all this research, in my opinion, it seems like he just okays things, but Frank Horrigan is kind of the dude in charge. Not officially. Like, if they needed to, they could overpower any decision Frank could come to the president with, but it's a 15-foot man in a suit of advanced power armor. And I'd like to preface all of what I'm saying by saying that I get all of my lore off of the Fallout Wiki, fallout.fandom.com, the Nukipedia, if you will. And a lot of this is taken from the Fallout Bible, which is written for the older games. A lot of Fallout 1 stuff, a lot of Fallout 2 stuff, some pre-war stuff, some post-war stuff that takes place in between games. It's not considered canon by the wiki itself because it's not a canon source, but I consider it canon because it comes from the original writers, and anything to not be taken from the Bible I feel like goes against what Fallout should be at its core, which is a critique of capitalism in modern day and all this other fun stuff. So I consider the Fallout Bible to be canon, and like I said, a lot of what I'm referencing comes from that. Now, Dick Richardson was elected president in 2220. He enters the office on March 5th of 2220, and like I said, will run as president for 5 solid terms. The Enclave communications officer, when you talk to him trying to get your way to the oil rig, he can respond to you through one of the dialogue options with, and everything's always tighter out here at Enclave, and the fucking president's watching like a hawk. This is a man who ruled through fear and surveillance. A man who can't show you reason why you're supposed to follow him, why you're supposed to have faith in them, you're supposed to believe in the words that come out of their mouth, will punish you for having questions. And any regards of any sort of a complaint was disloyalty. It was essentially an act of treason against Enclave, against the United States of America. And he took that power and ran with it. Another thing he could say when you ask him, the Enclave communications officer, you can say that you're here, the chosen one, the player character, can say that they're here to fix something. And he goes, ain't that the truth? Just don't let anyone who's got the president's ear hear that. You'll be making cattle runs to New Reno until the end of time, pal. So even an Enclave communications officer, and in-game he's a talking head, the communications man, of a fella in advanced power armor, which would later be renamed to Enclave Power Armor or XO1 or XO2, which is a weird thing that I can never find ever again, that like DC Enclave had XO2 armor. This is a man who is like a lifer. He's a man who's in the United States Army as it stands at this point in time, but he's Enclave. And even he knows, don't say the wrong thing in front of the wrong person, or for the rest of your life, you could be just working as manual labor. This is not the man. He's not the man that you would expect to be the leader of the free world, even though it is now the Enclave and not so much the United States of America. It's not the type of fella you would assume to be in charge. He's a small, nervous man who can barely pay any sort of attention at any given moment. He's weak, he's insecure, and he's fragile. He's honestly the worst type of person that should be in any sort of leadership. But that's the type of people we continuously see in any form of leadership. Someone who got bullied to the point that it's everyone else's problem, not theirs. They didn't have a problem. It wasn't the person who... It's just everyone else's problem now. It's something they can never get over. There's also a man who is a nepotism baby and got everything he was handed to, and then when they said, you're going to be president now, he said, yeah, why the fuck would I not be president? By the 2140s, the Enclave adopts an ideology of just mass genocide. Dick Richardson wants to cement his legacy in Enclave with the ratification of mutant. So anything mutant. And the way the Enclave looks at mutation is anybody who isn't born in Enclave. If you are not an Enclave citizen, you are considered other. You are considered less than, and by proxy, you are a mutant. There's a few dialogue options. There's one that I have written down that I'll be reading in a moment that the president, Dick Richardson, accuses or assumes the chosen one is just a mutant, even though their ace in the hole, their secret weapon, their thing to be feared, is a mutant in power armor. He wants to kill everything that isn't, every human, everything with a pulse that isn't Enclave. Many of his plans for the Enclave are just carryovers from his father, who was president 20 years ago. So a lot of the ideas he has are just whatever his daddy told him to do. One of them being advanced power armor being worked on from pre-war designs. In October of 2220, the advanced power armor program had finished, and the president puts an official order in to classify any and all deaths and injury that took place during the project as to not lower morale. Here's this piece of technology. Here is supposed to be the strongest piece of armor to ever be made. The Enclave also are the only people at this point in the timeline that have vertibird access. The only other people that have vertibird access, if I'm correct, is she. And the she reverse engineer a fallen vertibird and get it working. And then because of the events of Fallout 3, it's explained that there's some weird thing where they found plans and to make vertibirds, and now that's why Brotherhood of Steel at this point, which I'm not going to go super into. It's just one of those things. In the 2240s, the Enclave is so powerful. They have one of the most advanced set of armors. They have laser weapons out the ass and fucking helicopters, man. And it's such a dangerous operation to make this that they know if they heard X amount of people have died, people would lose faith in a big bad way in the Enclave. Now, on July 20th of 2236, the Enclave finds the ruins of the Mariposa military base. This is where Frank Horrigan comes into play. They use slave labor from kidnapped wastelanders to excavate the site. In January of 2237, they find a pure strain of FEV deep inside the base. Finding this irradiates most of the people, and for some reason, Frank Horrigan is there, and he gets exposed to this and slowly mutates. Now, the United States Chemical Corps, which is a real thing, is one of the few times that I can actually say that I went off of the wiki to the real Wikipedia, to get an actual factual statistic on what something was. So all of my lore comes from fallout.fandom.com, but a little bit extra of it comes from Wikipedia. The U.S. Chemical Corps was founded in 1918, June 28th of 1918. It's a branch of the U.S. Army. It's tasked with defending against chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear weapons. Now, the Enclave has reinstated this post-war. And by the guy who's in charge of it during the 2240s has the greatest name ever, Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Charles Curling. And if you're a Fallout fan, you might recognize Curling from somewhere, and I'll tell you in a minute. They immediately began developing the FEV, the pure strain they found at Mariposa, into a viable toxin. And in 2241, 4 years after the discovery, they make FEV Curling 13. Curling 13, named after Dr. Curling, Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Charles Curling, and the fact that they used this strain to experiment on civilians that were considered pure from Fall 13 because they hadn't been exposed to radiation. Some of them had, some of them haven't. The Enclave wanted to eradicate the entire mainland of the United States using this version of FEV. Anyone that did not have the immunization shot would die a horrible death. Now, you can talk to Dick Richardson. You could talk to him a lot, the president of Enclave. You can talk to him quite a bit. And the Chosen One can say, just because everyone out there doesn't have the exact copy of your DNA doesn't give you a license to exterminate them. President Dick Richardson will reply with, "Oh, I don't relish the decision. If there was any other way, but there isn't. No price is too heavy for the survival of the human race. If you were human, you'd feel the same way." So not only do they hate anything mutated, do they hate super mutants, they hate ghouls, and some ghouls aren't even, like, you know, if you play the games, you're aware. Some of the ghouls aren't even feral. Some of them just want to live by themselves and have their nose rot off their face so they can they do drugs in the subway and hang out. But now if you do not have blonde hair and blue eyes, you gotta go. Anyone who isn't Enclave is considered to be a mutant. And as you can probably infer by everything I've been saying about how awful this man is, he's 200% in favor of using FEV Curling 13. The previous quote that I just read should prove it. Now, in the fall of 2242, using the PMD Valdez, the Chosen One makes their way onto the Enclave oil rig mere hours before the project to release FEV Curling 13 was finished. A nuclear detonation was used to destroy the Enclave oil base, and it erased almost every single thing in Enclave data saying that he was even a person. There isn't a ton of stuff after this that happens. Even on the wiki, it says that the term president is used as a term to scare children. It's like a boogeyman hiding, which doesn't entirely make sense to me because President Tandy is president for 80-something years. But there is a reference to him in Fallout 3. John Henry Eden, the then president of the Enclave, says all of the presidents from Washington to Richardson, implying that they've kept going with presidency all throughout. But they got rid of like one of the core rules. Like the reason why presidents have the ability to do 2 terms of 8 years is because after 8 years, the first president, George Washington, went, "All right, I'm kind of done." And they use that. I think it's Taft or Roosevelt is the only president, I think, to get 3 terms. And after that, he walked away. And then after that, they were like, hey, maybe, not 12 years of presidency. And they went back to 8. They set the standard of 8 based on what the first president, George Washington, did. John Henry Eden might be one of the only things that really remember who Richardson are. But his entire personality is an amalgamation of every single president that had ever been a part of the U.S. system. You can talk to President Richardson about a lot of stuff. You can talk to him at length about FEV, Project FEV Curling 13, Vice President Daniel Byrd's health, which I thought was really interesting. And I don't have anything really written about Danny Byrd, but there's a thing in there that says he's a quiet, nervous man with food stains all over his suit. I don't know what the process of a vice president is in the Fallout universe, especially at this point in time, but it's usually the president picks who he wants his running mate to be. So I picture these guys as boyhood friends, and they're both just like bumbling idiots. Like they were just like chubby losers. Because that's what I get from Dick Richardson. He's just kind of like a chubby dude. Like he's schlubby. He refuses to just shave his head. He's balding. Like he's probably really into something niche that's kind of like cute and endearing, but he's a monster. But he's only a monster because everybody around him his entire life has told him, you have to be a monster. Just a really interesting cat. You can talk about the vice president's health, China, the Great War, the true purpose of the vaults, mutation, the fate of the Chosen One's fellow villagers, and a myriad of other stuff. He's a character that I feel like not a ton of people know about. There's a few videos floating around about him. I haven't seen them in preparation of this. But he's a character who I feel like should be more known by the fan base. I feel like a lot of fans really only know Fallout 4 and Fallout 76, and that's fine if that's your starting point. But imagine getting into Final Fantasy 17 and not wanting to go back and see anything else. I get if older games really aren't your bag. There's a wiki. But anyway, that's really all I have to say about President Dick Richardson, one of the presidents of the United States, one of the last presidents of the Enclave, if it is to be believed that the Enclave is completely gone at this point. And that's all I really have for this week's lore.